All right, for this next section, I thought before we get into setting up our fake internet, I thought it would be valuable to go over kind of what this network is going to look like, the parts of it, and what each part is going to function as. And so really what I want to do is break out my new drawing pad for this one. So follow me on a journey through the malware analysis network. So let's say that this laptop icon right here is our physical host. Now, on our physical host, we have a couple of virtual machines. And what we've already succeeded in doing is making a network that is going to be shielded from our virtual machines. In other words, the physical host is acting as kind of the facilitator for everything that's going to be inside of this network, but there's no way for the virtual machines inside to actually route out to the physical host. So we're basically have a couple of consoles into these virtual machines, and they have no network capability back out towards our physical host, and that's exactly what we want. All right, so let's talk about the two virtual machines that we have inside of this network. Remember, this is the 10.0.0.0/24 network, and really there are only two hosts in this network. We've got over here, host number 1, Flare VM. And over here, host number 2, we've got Rem Nux. Flare VM and Rem Nux. Flare VM is our first one that we're interested in because it is a Windows operating system. It is important that when you're studying malware, you have a place that you can run the malware, otherwise known as detonating it, that matches the architecture of what it was designed to do. So when we detonate malware, and I'll draw a little bug here. So we've got this guy, and he's got some legs, and he's got some antenna. So that's our bug, our malware bug. When we detonate this, boom, it will have its full effect on the operating system because it was designed for the Windows operating system. Now, it begs the question, why do we have this Remnux host, which is a Linux operating system? And the reason for that is because it benefits us greatly to have an operating system that the malware was not designed to detonate within. And so what Remnux ends up doing is it ends up being a couple different things. One of them is going to be an internet simulator. So Remnux has this capability where we can set up a little program called INetSim, and it's going to respond to any outbound internet requests that the malware is going to make. The malware is going to say, hey, I'm detonating right now. I'm making an HTTP request to some strange website. And Remnux with this internet simulator program is going to say, oh, I got you, fam. Go ahead and send me what you got, and I will send you back some information. So it helps that Remnux is sitting on this network to be able to respond to requests like that. There are, in fact, programs that do this on Flare VM, but we're going to do them on Remnux so that we have an external location to be able to study malware. The other thing that we're going to do, in a broader sense, is a network analysis platform. And so we're going to look at things like Wireshark and TCP dump, and we're going to take the requests that are coming in from this malware detonation, and we're going to study them at the network protocol level. And so broadly speaking, what we want to do is set up two different locations. One that's going to focus on host-based indicators, and one that's going to help us with network-based indicators. So let's say the malware detonates, boom, and it changes some files over here on Flare VM. And it deletes some files, or it adds something, or it changes a registry key. You're not necessarily going to know about those host-based indicators over here on Remnux. But let's say the malware detonates, boom, and it sends some HTTP requests over the wire. We're going to be able to pick those up using our network telemetry, meaning Wireshark and TCP and the fake internet simulator that we're going to be putting up. And that's why it's beneficial to have two virtual machines in this network. one to be able to study the host-based indicators, and one to be able to study the network-based indicators. All right, now enough of me talking. Let's go ahead and set up the internet simulator and test it so that we know that it works. All right, and we're back over here on Remnux. Now, the program that we want to set up to fake the internet for this malware range is called INetSim. INetSim. And if you run INetSim, it's actually quite easy to start. It starts right up, and it has a whole bunch of services, and these are great, but there's really one that we want that's not running right now. So we can Control-C. If you hit Control-C out of that process, it should stop. And so before we run INetSim again, we're going to sudo nano etc inetsim inetsim.conf file. And this is the config file that INetSim uses to run the program, and hit enter. Now, if you have not used Nano before, I will give you some pointers as we go along so that you know how to use the text editor for it. But really, any text editor that's available on Remnux can be used to edit the text of this file. So if you find another one on Remnux that you're more comfortable in, just go ahead and use that one. No big deal. Anyway, we are up at the top of the INetSim configuration file, and what we want to do is scroll down to this Start Service section, which is right near the top, and you'll see that a bunch of the other services are already uncommented, meaning they don't have this little hashtag symbol or pound symbol in front of it. And we really want our DNS server up and running for our malware detonation. So what we want to do is remove the comment, and you can just hit the delete key to remove the comment to make that a service that will start up. So the second thing that we want to do is we want to go find, and we're going to scroll down to service bind address here. And so what we want to do is uncomment service bind address, which is set to this 10.10.10.1, delete that, and we do 0.0.0.0. And that is a shorthand IP address assignment for all interfaces. So this will bind to all interfaces on the host. All right, next up, we want to go find the DNS default. So we scroll down, and we keep scrolling, and we keep scrolling, and we do find the service DNS here, right here. Now, our default port is going to be fine as 53 because that's the default for DNS, but this default IP is what we're interested in. So what we want to do is uncomment the DNS default IP. And if we just leave it to the default, it'll be 127.00.1, but that's not really going to help us. We want this to be the IP address of our Remnux box. So what we want to do is set this to the IP. Remember that the IP in this instance is 10.0.0.3. And we can actually correlate that if we open up another terminal window, or we open up a new tab here and we just do a quick IPA, we see that our IP address is 10.0.0.3. All right, looking good. And so if we have done those things, we can then hit Control-O, which writes to the file, and we leave the file name as default and hit enter. And now we can hit Control-X to save and exit the file. Now let's start up INetSim again. We'll do INetSim. And this time we see that our DNS53 TCP UDP is actually started along with all of the other services that are running. And that's good. That's what we want. All right. Now, what does INetSim do? Well, to do that, we're going to go back to our Flare VM box, which I've powered down. All right, so we are back over on Flare VM. And the reason I wanted to come over here was to show you how INetSim is going to work. So we open up Google Chrome, and what we'll do is go to 10.0.0.3, which is the default address of our Remnux box. And if we go to that address on HTTP, we find the default HTML page for INetSim HTTP server fake mode. And look at that. It actually serves us out a default page. There's not a whole lot here, but it does give us a 200 OK, and it serves us some HTML. So what if we go to https:// and hit enter? Now, it will say not secure because it doesn't have a correct certificate. The certificate is invalid, but it still serves us out something on the page. So if you think maybe a malware sample has detonated and it reaches out for a second stage to some URL, right? This is going to serve it out and respond to that request and say, yes, I am that address. Send me your information. And so another interesting feature of INetSim is if you go to something like mals.exe, and you hit enter, it actually downloads something instead of just returning a 404. And so let's take this, let's throw it right on our desktop, and let's double click. What happens? INetSim, this is the INetSim default GUI binary. So it actually downloads an executable to our downloads folder. Now, this is useful for something like a piece of malware that operates to download and execute a second stage. So let's say that a piece of malware reaches out to some URL and it downloads second stage payload.exe. Instead of just returning a 404 and saying, oh, I don't know what that is, INetSim actually does respond to it. And we'll at least know it won't be the actual payload because it's the same kind of executable every time, but it still does download one. So let's say this drops into maybe like the temp directory or something like that. We could actually go hunt this down and say, hey, the malware actually got a second stage payload and it actually goes to this directory. And we can take that as a fact and record that. And there's actually one more thing that we want to do here. We'll go down to our start menu and we'll do network connections, view network connections. And we want to look at our Ethernet adapter. We can double click on this and go to properties. And we'll go down to Internet Protocol version 4. And we are obtaining our IP address automatically. That's okay. We can leave that as the default. But we want to go down and use the following DNS server address. And we want to set this to the DNS INetSim server that we just created, which is the Remnux box, which is 10.0.0.3. And we'll go ahead and click OK, and we'll click OK, and we can exit out of this. So at this point, if I type in any old address, so asd.com, it will go to, and you know what, let's do that again so it shows it from a fresh Chrome tab just to really drive the point home here. We open up a fresh Chrome tab and we go to asd.com. And it serves out the default HTML page for INetSim, the exact same page that we got from punching in the IP address. And so what this means is that we now have a functional fake DNS server that's going to respond to any DNS request that we put in here. We can put in freetshirts.com and we get INetSim. We can put in fancy.lad.snacks.info and we get INetSim. And the idea is that we're going to be able to get a really good list of every domain name that malware calls out to when we detonate it inside of this network, simply because we now have INetSim running at the Remnux IP address. That's super important, and it's a very powerful tool, and it will help you out immensely when we start to do the network indicators in this course. And now, with no further ado, we are now at the part of this course where we get to actually detonate malware inside of our Flare VM workstation. I'm excited for it. You should be excited for it. Let's go to the next video and let's get this party started.